I remember the moment I pressed record on my phone, thinking I was about to capture something ordinary, a midnight walk home from a friend's party, but it turned into something I can't shake from my soul. It was nearly 1 a.m. in late November. The icy air seemed to cut through my jacket and skin, sending shivers down my spine with each step. The houses on my block were all dark except for a single window, a dim yellow glow that seemed alive somehow. The silhouette in the window remained perfectly still, a black form against the weak light. As I walked past, phone in hand, I pressed record. Just a habit I'd gotten into to keep myself feeling a bit more comfortable when I walked home alone at odd hours. I meant it to be a kind of video diary, a way to stay anchored in reality when the world felt silent and strange at night. But when I played back the video, I noticed something I hadn't noticed in person. The silhouette in the window. It turned. Its head. Naturally, a person might move, blink, or shift their view, except there were no people in that home. It belonged to Mr. Harper, a retired man who died nearly a year earlier, alone in his home. His body was not found for days afterwards, and when it was, rumors circulated about strange messages scrawled on his bedroom wall and a bloody handprint smeared across the glass. As I pressed pause and zoomed in, my breath faltered. The silhouette seemed to be staring directly into my phone's camera, directly at me, from a home where nobody should be alive. My pulse skyrocketed. I turned back toward the two-story Victorian, thinking I'd made a mistake, that I'd gotten it all confused in the dim light. But when I looked up, the silhouette was gone. The light was off. The whole place fell back into deep shadow. Suddenly, a rush of icy wind whipped through me. Whatever was in that window, and whatever it was, it hadn't been Mr. Harper. It hadn't been human. It was something else. Whatever it was, it seemed to be aware of me. It seemed to know I was there, phone in hand, trying to illuminate its silhouette. As I walked away, faster now, nearly jogging, I felt something follow me. The feeling of piercing eyes boring into the back of my neck remained with me all the way home. When I fell asleep that night, if you could call it that, I kept replaying the video, pausing it, staring into that silhouette. The face seemed less a face and more a collection of shifting shadows, eyes that were not eyes, a mouth that opened without lips. Whatever it was, it seemed hungry, and I realized now this was only the first in a series of horrors I'd become entangled in, a descent into something I barely believed was possible. I remember the moment I pressed record on my phone, thinking I was about to capture something ordinary, a midnight walk home from a friend's party, but it turned into something I can't shake from my soul. It was nearly 1 a.m. in late November. The icy air seemed to cut through my thick leather jacket and skin, sending a rush of freezing pins and needles up my arms and back. Each step I took seemed to break a fragile sheet of silence underfoot, a crispy leaf here, a gravel stone there, making me wince at how much my movements seemed to illuminate my presence in the oppressive midnight calm. The houses on my block were all dark except for a single window, a dim yellow glow that seemed alive somehow. The silhouette in the window remained perfectly still, a black form against weak light, a silhouette without depth, without face or detail, just pure shadow. As I walked past, phone in hand, I pressed record, just a habit I'd gotten into over the years to keep myself feeling a bit more comfortable when I walked home alone at odd hours. It meant I'd have a literal record, something I could watch back if something weird were to happen. I hadn't expected it to come in handy in the way it did that night, but when I played back the video, I noticed something I hadn't noticed in person. The silhouette in the window. It turned its head. Naturally, a person might move, blink, or shift their view, except there were no people in that home. It belonged to Mr. Harper, a retired man who died nearly a year earlier, alone in his home. His body was not found for days afterwards, and when it was, Rumors circulated about strange messages scrawled on his bedroom wall and a bloody handprint smeared across the glass. As I pressed pause and zoomed in, my breath faltered. The silhouette seemed to be staring directly into my phone's camera, directly at me, from a home where nobody should be alive. The face seemed less a face and more a collection of shifting shadows, a grotesque approximation of human features, piercing, bottomless eyes where the sockets should be, a grotesque mouth without lips. Whatever it was, it seemed hungry. Suddenly a rush of icy wind whipped through me. Whatever it was in that window, whatever it was, it hadn't been Mr. Harper. It hadn't been human. It was something else. Whatever it was, it seemed to be aware of me. It seemed to know I was there, phone in hand, trying to illuminate its silhouette. As I walked away, faster now, nearly jogging, I felt something follow me. The feeling of piercing eyes boring into the back of my neck remained with me all the way home. Each time I turned around, there was nothing, just barren trees, a few dimly glowing windows, and the oppressive silence of a neighborhood asleep. But I couldn't shake it, the feeling of being pursued by something that didn't obey ordinary rules. When I fell asleep that night, if you could call it that, I kept replaying the video, pausing it, staring into that silhouette. The face seemed less a face and more a collection of shifting shadow, eyes that were not eyes, a mouth that opened without lips. Whatever it was, it seemed hungry. I realize now this was only the first in a series of horrors I'd become entangled in, a descent into something I barely believed was possible. The following nights were filled with strange disturbances. I'd find the furniture in my home slightly repositioned in the morning, a dining room chair a few feet away from the table, a stack of books tipped over, small things at first. Then the noises started, soft scratching in the walls, tapping against the window pane at odd hours, 2 a.m., 3 a.m., a rhythmic rapping that seemed purposeful. I tried ignoring it, tried believing it was mice in the wall, or a branch in the wind, but deep down I knew it was something else. Whatever had noticed me that first freezing night was now making its presence felt in my home. About a week later, I awoke from a nightmare in which I walked back past Mr. Harper's abandoned home and pressed my face against the icy glass. Inside, a silhouette stood in the dim glow. Not Harper, not human, something ancient, something that seemed to be wearing human form as a disguise. It pressed its face against the glass from the other side, a face made of shifting blackness and piercing voids. It whispered something, a word I couldn't quite make out, and then I fell backwards into a bottomless well of freezing dark. I awoke in a cold sweat, my phone in hand. The video from that first encounter was gone, erased. All I had left were my memories, and a deep, persistent fear that whatever I'd crossed paths with that night was not finished with me. I tried staying at a friend's for a few nights, but the disturbances followed me there. The scratching in the walls, the rapping at the windows, it seemed to find me wherever I went. It seemed attached to me now, a shadow I couldn't shake. I turned to the police, thinking I might be able to at least convince them something was stalking me, but when I tried to show them the video, gone. All the files were erased from my phone, messages gone, photos gone. Whatever it was seemed to be erasing not just physical traces of itself, but also literal data, wiping away any proof it existed. In a state of growing paranoia, I fell back into my home, boarding up the windows, ignoring phone calls, ignoring messages from friends. I turned off all the lights, except a small reading lamp, thinking it might keep whatever it was at bay. But I was wrong. About 3 a.m., when the silence was thick enough to cut, something pressed against my bedroom door from the outside. The doorknob turned, once, then again. Then slowly, excruciatingly, the door opened just a crack. A rush of freezing air filled the room, and I saw it. 2 piercing black points, a face made of shadow, staring in. I tried to move, tried to speak, tried to resist whatever power it held over me, but I remained paralyzed, powerless. The silhouette crossed the threshold without a single stride. It seemed to simply appear at the foot of my mattress. Whatever it was, it gazed down at me with an ancient malice, a hunger that seemed to come from somewhere elemental, something older and more terrible than death. As it pressed forward, I felt it tug at something deep within me, not just my soul, not just my body, but something more fundamental, something I hadn't even known I possessed. It seemed to be draining me, consuming something elemental, my ability to feel, to connect, to be human. And then everything went black. I awoke hours later, freezing, weak, unsure of myself, unsure if I was entirely me. Whatever it was had crossed a boundary that should be absolute. I hadn't died, but I hadn't remained whole either. This was the first part of my nightmare, the moment when my ordinary life fell into something incomprehensible, a descent into pure fear. Whatever crossed my path that icy November, night opened a door I hadn't meant to, a door that may be impossible to close. Whatever it wants from me, whatever it is, I fear this is only the beginning. I remember the first moment I opened my eyes after that freezing encounter. It felt as though something had been removed from me, something fundamental. Whatever it was, my ability to connect, to feel entirely human, seemed diminished. I was alive, but a piece of me was gone, a piece I hadn't even recognized was there until it was taken. In the dim glow of a single candle, the last bit of light I hadn't yet erased from my home, I pressed my fingertips against my sternum, against a spot just above my heart. There was a strange emptiness there now, a literal void, a feeling akin to having a hole in your soul. I pressed harder, trying to find something, some spark of the person I'd been, but it seemed unreachable. Whatever it was had gotten its hooks into me. For days afterwards, I remained in my home, unwilling or perhaps unable to venture outside. I kept the windows boarded up, the doors locked. Whatever had crossed my path seemed to have crossed a boundary I hadn't even known existed, a boundary between my soul and something else. The oppressive silence was my only company, punctuated by strange scratching, rhythmic rapping, and the occasional fleeting silhouette darting past a crack in the boards. Some nights, when the silence seemed thick enough to cut, I'd find messages scratched into my furniture, words I hadn't put there, messages that seemed to come from whatever now lived within me. "You are ours. It is too late. Give in." My phone remained a black mirror. Messages gone, phone numbers erased. It seemed whatever had crossed me was not only physical, but digital, able to erase traces of itself from memory and from data. My attempts to reconnect with friends were fruitless. Messages went undelivered, phone calls fell into silence. It seemed I'd crossed a barrier, not just from the physical world into something else, but from the network of human connection into a barren wilderness. Whatever I'd opened myself up to, I was stranded there, alone. I tried to destroy my phone, thinking it might be a link, a literal phone line, tying me to whatever was stalking me. But when I tried, something impossible happened. I placed it on the wooden cutting board, raised a hammer, and struck it with all my force. The phone remained unharmed. The hammer rebounded from it as if it were made of stone. I tried again and again until my knuckles were bloody and raw. The phone remained spotless, unharmed, a black monolith tying me to something I couldn't cut myself free from. This seemed to be the moment it crossed from a curiosity, a fear, into pure nightmare. Whatever this was, it was not bound by ordinary physical laws. It seemed instead to be a manifestation of something more elemental, something older and darker, something that lived not in the physical but in the spaces in between. The Gaps, the doubts, the hidden places we pretend not to see. As the days turned into nights and back again, a restless, dream-like state where I barely noticed the passing of time, I fell into a kind of madness. I started seeing it in my peripheral vision. A silhouette darting just out of view when I turned my head, a face pressed against the glass just a moment after I crossed a room. My surroundings seemed thinner, less substantial. The walls seemed to ripple under my touch. Furniture seemed to warp and fold in upon itself when I looked away. The rapping at the doors and windows seemed more persistent, more purposeful. A rhythmic knuckle-tapping that seemed to say, "We know you're in there, and we're not finished with you yet." Sleep offered no refuge. Whenever I closed my eyes, I fell into a dreamscape made of freezing blackness. There were countless doors, endless wooden doors, all identical, and when I opened them, I fell into a void filled with piercing yellow eyes staring back at me. I fell and fell, powerless, stranded in a nightmare that seemed less a dream and more a descent into another dimension, a place where physical form fell away and soul itself was exposed and vulnerable. My health deteriorated. I grew thinner, paler. My cheeks grew sunken, and my eyes glimmered with a strange light, a reflection of whatever lived just beneath my skin. I avoided food. I avoided water. I remained hunched in a corner of my bedroom, a dimly glowing phone pressed against my forehead, trying to keep a grip on whatever remained of my soul. And then, on the seventh day, or what I believed was the seventh, for I'd started losing track of time, something changed. The rapping fell silent. The messages scratched into furniture seemed finished. The oppressive feeling in my home seemed to lift. I felt light, nearly euphoric. For a moment, I believed it was over, that whatever had crossed me had gone, that I'd come through it. I walked to the mirror. I turned it toward me. Instead of my face, I saw something else staring back, something that was me, and yet not me. Eyes black as obsidian, a silhouette made of shifting shadow. Inside its form, countless piercing yellow eyes opened and closed, and a chorus of awareness. A legion, wearing my flesh as a disguise. I pressed my forehead against the mirror in disbelief, and it pressed back. Suddenly I felt it rush through me, not tearing me, but filling me, consuming me from within. Whatever remained of my soul was gone. Whatever I had crossed paths with on that freezing November night, it hadn't finished with me. It had become me. When I opened my eyes again, if you can call them that, I was no longer in my home. I was somewhere else, somewhere in between. The world around me was a barren reflection of my own, a dimly glowing nightmare made of ashes and bone. The houses were husks, the trees were petrified, the sky was a purple-black expanse that seemed to ripple just above me, alive and oppressive. There were no stars, no moons, only piercing yellow points of light that opened and closed like giant, grotesque eyes, countless eyes, all staring directly at me. I tried to move forward, tried to put a distance between myself and those piercing gazes, but the barren land seemed to fold upon itself. Each step forward seemed to bring me back to the place I'd started, a labyrinth constructed from my worst memories, a nightmare made manifest. As I walked, I recognized certain landmarks, a twisted silhouette of my home, the ruins of Mr. Harper's abandoned place, all blended together into a grotesque nightmare-scape. It was a reflection of my world, a world under the control of whatever had crossed me. Suddenly, a chorus of voices rose up from the barren earth, a chorus made from my own voice, multiplied 1,000-fold, begging, accusing, whispering. Where are you? Who are you? Who do you belong to now? The questions gnawed at me, tearing away whatever remained of my soul's defenses. I fell to my knees, pressed my hands against my head, tried to block it all out, but there was no peace here. There was no refuge. Whatever was left of me was stranded in this nightmare, powerless, forsaken, and slowly eroding. As I pressed my forehead against the barren soil, a soil made from ashes and memories, I felt something move beneath me. The ground trembled, then opened, tearing a deep rift that fell away into blackness. I fell, endlessly, into a chasm filled with the shifting forms of countless people, or what remained of their souls. Some were faceless, some were in agony, clawing at me, trying to pull me down with them. Some were silent, their eyes opened in eternal shock and recognition, a recognition I hadn't earned or understood. As I fell, I noticed something else, something at the center of it all, a massive silhouette made of pure shadow. It was not a face, not a form in the earthly sense. It was a collection of countless piercing yellow eyes, a sprawling, incomprehensible deity, a manifestation of the nightmare itself. This was the true form of whatever had crossed me that freezing November night. This was what had gotten a grip on my soul and made me its own. As I fell toward it, powerless to resist, I felt my memories start to dissolve, my past slipping away piece by piece, my name gone, the face I was born with gone, the feeling of love, of happiness gone. All that remained were fear, agony, and submission. I was no longer myself. I was a piece of it, a tiny thread woven into its massive form, a chorus voice in its eternal nightmare, and yet some small piece of me remained, a spark, a kernel of resistance, a tiny, persistent I that hadn't been erased. It whispered a vow into the blackness. I will remember. Whether that vow was a form of hope or a curse, I do not know, but it meant I hadn't completely been erased. Some piece of me remained, a piece I might be able to use to find my way back, or a piece that this nightmare might yet destroy. The spark within me, that tiny thread of I, remained when everything else fell away. In the face of the nightmare's immense will, I pressed it close, unwilling to let it be erased. It was my anchor, the last piece tying me to a past I barely remembered, a person I once was. For a moment, just a moment, the oppressive chorus faltered. The countless yellow eyes quivered in their black heavens. Some tiny inconsistency, a soul unwilling to submit, seemed to undermine their unity. I felt it. A tremor, a ripple in the nightmare's form. Instead of pure domination, there was now a thread of resistance, me. As I fell through the endless black, I turned inward. I tried to remember who I was, where I came from, how I'd gotten here. Flashed through my mind were disjointed snapshots, a face in a mirror, my hands pressed against a phone, a freezing November night, messages scratched into furniture, the barren nightmare land I fell into. Each piece fell into place, not in a clear story, but in a feeling, a deep recognition. I hadn't been powerless all this time. I hadn't crossed into this nightmare by accident. I'd opened something myself, something I barely understood. I'd crossed a boundary, made a deal without realizing it. A deal that I was now trying to break. Suddenly, my descent slowed. Instead of falling, I hovered, suspended in a vast void made of ashes and regret. I forced myself upward, against the pull, toward something I hadn't noticed previously. A dim light, a crack in the heavens above. Me. The yellow eyes multiplied, trying to block it, trying to consume it, consuming me in the process. But I fought back. I pressed upward, piece by piece, soul fragments straining against the oppressive will of whatever had me in its grip. The nightmare seemed to tremble. The chorus fell into a discord. The silhouette made of countless piercing eyes faltered. As I rose, memories rushed back in a painful rush. The face I'd gotten a phone call from, the people I'd tried to contact, the home I'd lived in. I remembered my own name, a simple, human name, and I whispered it into the blackness. The moment I did, a shockwave rippled through the nightmare, tearing at its form. The countless yellow eyes closed briefly, blinded, disoriented. This was my chance. My soul struck upward, piercing through the heavens toward the dim light, a way back. Suddenly, I fell forward. My knees struck wooden boards. My hands pressed against something hard, earthly. I opened my eyes. And I was back in my home, back in my own body, kneeling in the center of my living room. The phone was there, resting face up on the floor in front of me. The messages were gone, the rapping, the scratching. It was all silent. For a moment, pure peace fell over me, a peace I hadn't felt in what seemed like eternity. But then, as I turned toward the mirror on the wall, a ripple crossed its surface. A fleeting silhouette, a piercing yellow gaze, a reminder that whatever had crossed me hadn't gone far. It was close, it was waiting, and I hadn't defeated it. I'd only escaped. My soul was back in my body, but it remained marked, a permanent bond tying me to something ancient and incomprehensible. Whatever peace I'd won was temporary. The nightmare hadn't finished with me, and I hadn't finished with it. The peace I felt upon my return was a fragile illusion, a thin sheet of glass that a single tremor could shatter. In the days that followed, I tried to live normally, to pretend everything was fine, but the nightmare remained with me, a permanent shadow anchored to my soul. I noticed it in small things at first. The phone, for instance, seemed different. It remained a black mirror, silent and inactive, yet it felt alive in some sinister way, a physical anchor tying me back to whatever crossed me. Some nights, when I turned it face down on the bedside table, I'd find it face up in the morning, without having touched it. Other nights, I'd hear it ringing, a deep, awful tone, even though it was powered off. When I pressed it, to my ear, there was only silence. Then a chorus of piercing yellow eyes seemed to illuminate in my mind's view, staring back at me. The nightmare seemed to be growing, spreading, influencing me in more intimate, persistent ways. Dreams I hadn't remembered in years came back to me in vivid detail. The feeling of falling, the barren land made of ashes, the countless yellow eyes closing in. I'd wake up dripping in freezing sweat, knuckles white from clawing at my mattress. Afraid I'd crossed back into its domain while asleep, my surroundings started to warp. Clocks fell backwards or stopped altogether. A photo on the wall, a photo of me smiling with my friends years earlier, seemed to slowly fade, the people beside me blurring into shadow, their faces erased. Every mirror seemed to warp my reflection. Sometimes I'd appear taller, thinner, a grotesque silhouette. Sometimes I'd briefly vanish altogether. My body started to suffer. I grew weak, sickly. My skin turned sallow and translucent in places, as if I were slowly fading from this world and into another. The people around me avoided me, crossed the road when I walked by. Some said I seemed different, not myself, a stranger wearing my face. As my physical form deteriorated, my mind seemed to become more porous, more susceptible to the nightmare's will. Whispers filled my thoughts, promises of peace if I would submit, become a part of it, let it consume me entirely. Some nights, when the temptation seemed overwhelming, I'd find myself in a kind of trance, dialing a number I hadn't meant to, putting the phone to my ear, until a chorus of piercing yellow eyes opened in my mind, and a voice made of countless soul fragments, said, "Your resistance is futile. Your soul already belongs to us." It seemed I was powerless, until something in me, the tiny spark I'd fought to keep alive, fought back once more. In a moment of pure will, I hurled the phone against the wall. It shattered, but the nightmare remained. Because it was not the phone. It was me. The nightmare was already within me, a permanent part of my soul. I fell to my knees, hands pressed against the wooden boards of my home, the home I barely recognized now. I cried, not from fear or pain, but from pure, raw hopelessness. How could I destroy something that lived within me, something that seemed woven into my very soul? As I knelt there, the room seemed to tremble, to warp, the nightmare closing in once more. The yellow eyes opened all around me, in the furniture, in the walls, in the ceiling, staring, piercing, hungry. It seemed this might be the moment I'd lose myself for good, the moment I'd become a permanent piece of it, a soul fragment in its endless nightmare chorus. But then something rose within me, a spark, tiny, nearly gone, but unmistakably mine. The memory of my own name, the feeling of having lived, of having a soul that belonged to me and me alone. I pressed that spark forward, against the oppressive will closing in, and prepared myself for the final showdown. The nightmare pressed in on me from all directions, a blackness made of countless piercing yellow eyes, a chorus of 1,000 stolen soul fragments. It seemed inescapable, it seemed eternal, but within me a spark remained, tiny, fragile, and yet more powerful than it seemed, because it was mine, my soul, my will, my ability to say no. As I pressed forward against the oppressive will, something extraordinary happened. The spark within me grew, first a glimmer, then a flame, then a blinding light. My memories rushed back in a rush, the face I'd gotten phone calls from, the people I'd crossed, the promises I'd made and forgotten. My name, my family, my home, all the things that made me who I am, came back to me in a rush of pure will. Suddenly, the chorus faltered. The piercing yellow eyes trembled, unsure, afraid. The nightmare tried to absorb me, to fold me into its countless soul fragments. But I fought back. With a decisive act of will, I turned all the power I'd kept hidden within myself against it. I forced myself forward, not backward in fear, not downward in submission, but upward, toward the light, toward freedom. As I pressed against it, the nightmare screamed, a piercing, soul-shaking roar, and then it cracked. The countless yellow eyes went dark, closed, fell away. The barren nightmare land fell silent. The oppressive will that had kept me enslaved dissolved. And, in its wake, I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Peace. Slowly, my surroundings shifted back to the earthly. I opened my physical eyes and found myself in my home once more, sitting on the wooden floor, surrounded by silence and dim, natural light. The phone lay in pieces against the wall, a pile of blackened circuits, a symbol of my final break from its power. The photo on the wall was clear again. The people in it were in focus, their faces visible and human. The mirror no longer warped my reflection. I saw myself, really myself, for the first time in what felt like an eternity. Stood up, shaky but alive. My body was weak from the nightmare's effects, thinner, sicklier, but I was healing. My soul was my own again. The oppressive yellow gaze was gone. The nightmare had tried to destroy me, absorb me, make me a piece of its eternal chorus. But I fought back. I remembered who I was, and in the face of unimaginable fear, I chose to stay myself. As I opened the door and stepped outside into the chilly morning air, I felt something else, something that hadn't been there for a long time. Hope. The nightmare was gone. The phone was gone. The oppressive will that tried to conquer me was gone. I was free, but I also knew I'd crossed a boundary that most people are never meant to cross. I'd looked into the face of something ancient and incomprehensible, something that will always exist just outside the periphery of human understanding, and lived to tell the tale. So a piece of it will remain with me forever. A shadow on my soul, a permanent reminder that there are things in this universe we were never meant to know, and yet I know them. As I walked away from my home into the growing light of day, I made a vow to myself. I would live. I would appreciate every moment, and I would carry this knowledge not as a curse, but as a warning, because now I know. The nightmare is real, and it waits just outside the light for a crack in our soul it can seep through. The end.